Hello, my name is Aparna Ajarapu, and I'm a medical student at the Carver College of Medicine. And today we are going to be learning about oil spills and how they impact our environment. And we'll be completing a fun oil spill challenge. So how do we use oil in our daily life? Well, we use gasoline to keep our cars running, oil to heat our homes in the winter, and coal to cook a barbecue in the summer. And fossil fuels provide the energy needed to complete these tasks. But what are fossil fuels? Well, fossil fuels are a natural fuel, such as the coal, oil, or natural gas, that's formed in the earth in the geological past from plant and or animal remains. Where do we get our oil from? Well, we can get oil from both offshore drilling and drilling on land. So while drilling on land, we dig deep holes under the Earth's surface, and in offshore drilling, we dig deep underneath the seabed in order to extract the oil from the Earth, as you can see in these two pictures. So on April 20th, 2010, we had the largest oil spill in history in the Gulf of Mexico. And during this oil spill, over 4.9 million barrels of oil were leaked into the ocean. So this is equivalent to about half of the amount of crude oil the US imports per day. So when we have a disaster like this, what happens to the environment? So while oil spills are harmful for our environment in that they impact our marine birds and mammals, as well as fish and shellfish, they destroy the insulating ability of fur-bearing mammals like the sea otter and the repellency of birds' feathers, leaving them without the ability to insulate from the cold water, causing them to die from hypothermia. In addition, juvenile sea turtles can also become trapped in the oil and mistake it for food. Dolphins and whales can inhale the oil, which can affect the lungs, the immune function, and reproduction. Oil spills can also pollute our fresh water and rivers. So who cleans up these spills? Well, environmental engineers do. These engineers design different cleanup methods and effectively communicate strategies with the community, the cleanup crew, and the company or person that's responsible for the spill. Environmental engineers' contributions to environmental cleanup are important in keeping our Earth's water and land healthy for us and animals. So today we will be simulating an oil spill, and it will be our mission to test different ways to clean it up. So the materials needed for this exercise are some bowls of water and oil to simulate the spill, food dye so we can test which method is the best way to clean up a spill, and then our cleanup materials, which will include cotton balls and napkins, or the absorption method, plastic spoons, which will be the skimming method, and dish soap, which will be the dispersal method. Optional are some habitat materials like large rocks to create an island, sticks and moss or pieces of lettuce, and fake fur or craft pom-poms and feathers. Okay, so before we start this activity, I'd like to ask you a few questions. How easy do you think it is to separate the oil from the water? Which method, the cotton balls, spoons, or dish soap, will be most effective in cleaning up our oil spill? And what happens to the fish, birds, and other animals that can come into contact with the oil? So let's get started. Okay. So here I have my 3 bowls of water. I've already added oil to my red bowl of water, my blue bowl of water. You can kind of see that oil bubble on top. And I'm going to add my oil to my green water because I have yet to do that. And you can guess what will happen when I add the oil. So I'm adding a tablespoon of oil here. Okay. Okay. And as you can see here, the oil is kind of repelling the water and a bubble is forming on top. You can kind of see that bubble on top. Okay. So, and we've added 3 different color dyes to the water to determine which method will work the best. And our goal is to collect the most oil we can without collecting the water. Okay, so let's start with our first method, which will be our skimming method. So I have my handy dandy spoon here, and I have my collecting um, glass here. And so I'm going to skim the surface for the oil, skimming the surface for the oil to try to collect the oil that's kind of collecting on the top. Okay, so skimming is important for removing a thick layer of oil on the top of the surface. But as you can see here, I'm still collecting some water with the oil, which is probably not the best. We want to collect the oil, but not the water. So collecting, skimming on the top here. So you can see that it's kind of difficult to do this. It's hard to just collect the oil, but not the water. Okay, trying my best here, and we're almost done, I think, with this method. Okay, so here we have our oil that was cleaned up with our skimming method. Okay, let me put this aside for our next method. So our next method is going to be our absorption method. So I have my blue water here for that, and I have my cotton balls to absorb the oil. So you can see that kind of big glob of oil on the top of the surface, floating on the top of the surface of the water. So I'm going to use my cotton ball, and I'm going to try to soak up my oil on the top here. Okay, and I'm going to squeeze it out in this bowl. So here you go again. So it should be noted that again, I'm seeing some water that's being transferred while trying to soak up the oil, which is probably not that good. And so as you can see here, my oil is floating on the top, and we're just soaking it up. You can actually try 2 cotton balls and see if that works better. So soaking up the oil on the top here. And I'm squeezing it out in my bowl here. Okay, so I think we're done with our absorption method. Here's kind of a shot of what we have for this cleanup method. Okay, I'm gonna put this aside, and then we're gonna proceed to our last method of cleanup. Okay, so for our last method of cleanup is going to be our dispersal method. So for this method, I'm going to use my dish soap, and I want to ask you, what do you think is going to happen when I add the dish soap to the oil spill? Okay, so here I'm going to add a few drops of dish soap. Okay, so did you see that dispersal of the oil on the water surface when I added the dish soap? Okay, now we're going to kind of mix this up a little and see what happens to the oil. Okay. So as you can see here, all of that glittery stuff on the top of our surface is that broken up oil. So this is a good technique because it kind of breaks up the oil into smaller droplets, and it may make it easier for kind of picking it up. But you can see that it's not very good at getting rid of the oil entirely on the water surface. So we're going to try to use our skimming and absorption method to clean up this oil and see how that works. So I have my collecting cup. We're going to first use the skimming method and try to get all of those dispersed and broken up oil droplets on our surface. We're going to try to collect those here. Seems to be working somewhat. Okay. And then we can also use our cotton swabs that I have here. You can also try this method as well. So I'm going to try to soak up all of the oil on the top of the surface here. Let's see if that works. Squeeze all that gunk out. Okay. But as you can see here, we're still kind of picking up some of that water, which is not ideal but here we go. Okay, so that was our dispersal method. So now we can kind of see our three methods that we used. So first we used the skimming method, second we used the absorption method, and third we used the dispersal method. So I'd like to ask you what you think of how these methods worked. So for our skimming method, you can kind of see some of the oil on the top of the surface, but we still see that red water that we picked up. So this did have some drawbacks, but we did pick some oil up too, as you can see the separation there. For our absorption method, we also picked up some water here, but we did also pick up a lot of oil, if you see those oil bubbles on the surface as well. Okay, and then finally for our dispersal method that we combined with our skimming and absorption methods, you can see all of those broken up foamy oil on the surface, and then some of the water still remained. Okay, so now that we're done comparing these three different methods, I'd like to ask you what was the best method in your opinion, and how do you think these oil spills impact the environment and the marine animals? Furthermore, with the dispersal method, I want you to think how adding the dish soap affected the water and the marine environment. Would the chemicals in the dish soap impact the marine environment in a bad way? I'd like you to brainstorm some ideas there. Okay. So I think we can all agree through this process that cleaning up oil is a very difficult process and it's not ideal. And the best way to kind of prevent these oil spills is to not have them in the first place. Okay. So now that we've completed the activity, I'd like to ask you, how do scientists clean up oil spills in real life? Well, scientists can use three methods to clean up oil spills. The first method is containment. So they use natural and synthetic absorbing materials to help prevent the spreading of oil during spills. Also, they use chemicals, and some of these chemicals make the oil more solid and keep the oil from reaching the shorelines in other sensitive habitats. Other chemicals can break up the oil into smaller particles, which mix with the water more easily. So this is kind of comparable to the detergent that we used to break up the oil in our oil spill mimic. And then the last method is the physical methods. So scientists can use boats to skim the sea surface, removing oil from the water, like we did with our spoon in our oil spill experiment. And on land, we may actually wipe the oil with absorbent materials, like the cotton balls we used in our experiment. And pressure washing and raking and bulldozing may also help absorb the oil. So in conclusion, oil spills are really harmful to our environment and negatively impact marine life. They are difficult and expensive to clean up, and it is our job to take care of our oceans for future generations to come. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and thank you for joining me for this activity.